Good evening, everyone. My name is Aina Canales Zarate, and I serve as the board chair of the City of Austin Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to our 2020 members meeting. As we all adjust to the new normal of staying home, staying safe, and balancing our work life remotely, this year we've shifted gears to host the annual members meeting as a virtual event, to make sure that our members stay engaged with the ongoing work of COAERS and what we're doing on behalf of the membership. So we thank you for joining this special live broadcast on Facebook and what we're doing on behalf of the membership. This annual event is an opportunity for all COAERS members to learn about important organizational updates. During our program today, you're going to hear from a number of COAERS executive team members, as well as the COAERS Board of Trustees, as we discuss the financial health of the retirement system and the investment program. And after the discussion, we're going to answer questions submitted by COAERS members ahead of the live event. Anyone who's tuned in to watch can also enter their questions in the comment section of the live video, and the COAERS staff will do their best to relay the questions from the audience back to the panel during the broadcast. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce the members of the COAERS Board of Trustees who are here today. The COAERS Board of Trustees is an 11-member governing body that provides oversight and sets policy for the organization. As fiduciaries, the decisions made by the board are for the exclusive benefit of the membership as a whole. The COAERS Board of Trustees is comprised of 4 elected active City of Austin employees, 2 retired employees, 1 city manager designee, 1 city council member, 2 city council appointed citizens, and 1 board appointed citizen. The trustees that are joining us today are Ed Vanino. Ed is the city manager's designee and the vice chair of the board. We also have city council member Leslie Poole. Amy Hunter, she is an active elected member from Austin Water. Yu Jiao Liu, active elected member from Public Works. Chris Nowak, active elected member from Austin Energy. Michael Benson, active elected member. We have Anthony B. Ross Sr., retiree elected member. Stephanie Beach, council appointed citizen. And Frank Merriman, council appointed citizen. Our other board member, who is a board appointed citizen, is Randy Spencer, and he could not join us today. Thank you, trustees. Before I introduce our executive director and the chief investment officer, I would like to recognize and thank the COAERS staff for the work that they do throughout the year. This year, most especially. It has been challenging for most organizations, including COAERS. However, COAERS leadership and staff anticipated what was coming when the news of the pandemic broke. They transitioned quickly and smoothly to working from home. The pension office business continues without interruption in the delivery of benefits and the service to the membership. You can be proud of the fact that your pension system led in this regard, creatively and quickly, anticipating and addressing issues so that the staff and the board could continue its work uninterrupted. You can be confident that COAERS staff's knowledge, dedication, and unquestionable loyalty is for the benefit of all the members of the system. Thank you, COAERS staff. Our discussion today will center on COAERS operations and initiatives, the retirement system, defined benefit plans, funding and sustainability, and the investment program. Here to lead the discussion is the COAERS Executive Director, Christopher Hanson, and COAERS Chief Investment Officer, David Beal. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. Chris, can you tell us a bit about what's happening at COAERS?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I'd like to introduce myself to the members out there. My name is Christopher Hanson. I am the Executive Director of the City of Austin Employees Retirement System. I've served in this position since 2015. Prior to joining the City of Austin Employees Retirement System, I served as the Executive Director of the State Pension Review Board. And before I get into my presentation, I'd like to take a moment to thank everybody, all of our members, for your service to the City of Austin. It's an honor and a privilege to work at the retirement system on your behalf, and I thank you for everything that you do to make our city as incredible as it is. My presentation is going to cover a couple topics: operations, initiatives, and our defined benefit sustainability. Excuse me. So first, getting into the question, Madam Chair, of what's going on at COAERS, I'd like to talk a little bit about COAERS operations, particularly around the events of the pandemic. All of COAERS staff have been working remotely since March 17th of this year. While we are working remotely, all of our critical operations are being managed effectively. Those critical operations include our monthly retiree payroll, investment management of the trust fund, conduct of our committee and board meetings, payment of our vendors, conduct of our monthly pre-retirement seminars, and working with our membership on benefit estimates and other customer service needs. I'd like to take a moment to thank the COAERS staff for all of their effort in this immediate and rapid transition that we had to make to a remote work environment. I'd also like to thank our members who've worked with us during these times. There are probably many of you out there who had to reschedule in-person meetings in March and in April, and we really appreciate your willingness to work with the COAERS staff as we move to this remote work environment. Your feedback has been extremely important to us and has been very supportive of the efforts of the COAERS staff, and it's very meaningful to us. So thank you all for all of your efforts in working through these tough times. In addition to moving our operations remotely, we've had to evaluate certain areas relative to our operations, such as succession planning. All of our divisions are actively engaged in reviewing our succession planning in light of the pandemic. We also continually review key benchmark data related to the pandemic to ensure that COAERS management and executive team is staying on top of the day-to-day changes that go on. It's important for us to balance the health and well-being of our staff as well as our members as we make decisions around our operations moving forward. As we evaluate those operations moving forward, we're going to carefully weigh the health and well-being of our staff and members against the need to continue to meet our critical operations, plan our future projects and events, and make sure that we manage the organization successfully during these challenging times. This is done through all the efforts from the Board of Trustees to the COAERS staff and our membership. And I want to again thank everybody involved for everything they're doing. We're going to continue to make sure we deliver the highest quality service and the events and services you're used to. As you can note now, we are delivering our annual members meeting, albeit that we've had to change it to a virtual event. And we're going to continue to strive to deliver that excellent quality of service and operational functions that you are depending on us for as we move forward. I'd like now to talk a little bit about the initiatives that are going on at COAERS. One of the most important initiatives that we've been working on over the last several years is the launch of our Member Direct portal. This is an online service that will be available to all of our members later this year. Our Member Direct portal will allow our membership to access their retirement information online. When we think about the type of information that's going to be available to our members, I'd like to give you an example of a few types of things that will be available to you. If you're a retiree, you will now be able to access your 1099 as soon as it's available, instead of having to wait for it to be delivered via the US Postal Service. You can also review your beneficiary designation to see if it is current and what you'd like to select. You can securely chat with members of the COAERS service team during business hours. In our anticipation of rolling out Member Direct, COAERS staff is planning future events similar to our annual member meeting online, where we'll be offering tutorials and walkthroughs of the portal itself. We'll be able to display the functionality for you and walk you through the different options that you'll have. Please be on the lookout for this event going forward, and we'd encourage all of our members who are interested to try to participate. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our member services staff. They're there to work for you, and they're always eager to serve our membership. Another initiative that we've been involved in over the last couple of years is expanded outreach to city departments. Until the pandemic and our need to move our work virtually, COAERS staff had been reaching out to and presenting at a number of city departments. We'd had presentations at Austin Energy, Austin Water, and the Parks and Rec Department. We're looking at ways to continue those presentations virtually, so please be on the lookout for events that involve COAERS and allow you to engage directly with our member services and management teams. We're also working on developing additional member educational services. If you're not aware, we have launched a YouTube page. On that page, we have several educational videos that provide education and information related to your retirement. I would strongly encourage everybody out there who's not familiar with our YouTube page to please look us up and please review the videos. We think they will be very helpful and educational to our membership. We're also working to enhance our ability to connect with our members, and we've launched several initiatives through social media. Obviously, we're hosting this annual members meeting through our Facebook Live page, and we're going to continue to reach out to our membership to make sure that you can stay engaged and aware of what's going on at COAERS. Social media has become a very important tool to connect with our membership, and we're going to continue to build that outreach. We're also looking at how we can elevate and implement best practices at COAERS. This includes the development of a risk management system, plan benchmarking, reviewing our cost structures on both the investment program and the delivery of our administration of benefits, as well as our continued plan sustainability review. Those are a few of the ongoing initiatives that we have at COAERS, and we're going to continue to tackle those even if we are in this remote environment. Speaking of plan sustainability, I am going to talk a little bit about that. But before I get into that, I'd like to take a moment to update our membership on the current actuarial status of COAERS. Usually we have our actuary from GRS, Lewis Ward, present, but in the interest of time and our need to get this information conveyed quickly and efficiently to you, I'm going to give you some key data points from the actuarial valuation. Our last actuarial valuation was conducted as of December 31st, 2019. And as you can see from the slide, our funded ratio at that time was 63.5%. That funded ratio represented the assets to the liabilities at that measurement date. The amortization period at that time was 40 years. The amortization period you can think of as a time projected to retire the unfunded liability. One of the important questions that comes up every year during our members meeting regards the COLA, the annual COLA that the board by state law reviews and makes a determination on. The funding policy requirements that the board has established for the granting of an annual COLA is a funded ratio of 80% and an amortization period of 20 years after the granting of that COLA. As you can see, we currently fall short of that standard. And as such, COAERS actuary will not be recommending a COLA this year.
Chris, there's a question that we received in the past from our members about health insurance. Can you share any updates on retiree health insurance, and will there be any changes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's an excellent question. First, I'd like to note that COAERS does not actually administer the retiree health insurance program. This is administered by the city. However, we have been informed by the city that there is no rate increase planned for 2021 for retiree health insurance.
Thank you.
I'm now going to move on to a discussion around defined benefit sustainability. Over the last couple years, the board has been proactively reviewing the long-term financial health and sustainability of the retirement system. This was done against the backdrop of recommendations from our actuary as well as our investment consultants and our professional staff that future investment returns due to lower inflation and interest rates could be something that we need to address. With that in mind, the board engaged in a review of its long-term sustainability. That has been an ongoing process. We've partnered with the city as we move forward in this, and the board has established a framework for that sustainability. I'm going to get into a little bit of that as we talk about what is going on regarding our review of long-term sustainability.
So Chris, if legislative changes were enacted in 2011, why are we here again?
Madam Chair, that's an excellent question, probably one many of our members are asking. And when we think about defined benefit funding, there's a formula, quite simple actually, that is displayed in front of you that outlines how defined benefit funding actually occurs. To have a sustainable defined benefit plan, the contributions and investment income must balance with the benefits and expenses over the long term. Some of the headwinds that we faced over the last decade relate to the comments I made earlier. The expectation on the investment income as we've moved from 2011 to 2020 is that future investment earnings are expected to be lower. The board conducted an actuarial experience study last year in 2019, and on the recommendation of the board's actuary and in conjunction with discussion with the board's investment consultant, the expected future returns of the trust fund were lowered from 7.5% to 7%. Early on in 2016, the board conducted an experience study with the same result, where it lowered the investment return assumption going forward from 7.75% to 7.5%. So since 2011, the future expected earnings under the investment income have come down from 7.75% to 7%. That reduces our future expected investment income. Also during that time, during our experience studies, our actuary has recommended that we adopt assumptions to reflect the fact that people are generally living longer. This is a great thing for all of us, that people tend to live a lot longer than they did 30, 40 years ago. But as we manage our defined benefit plan, that improved longevity of our membership adds additional costs to the retirement system. Over the last 5 years, improved longevity has added nearly $200 million in additional costs to our benefits. On top of that, our contribution policy, as it stands, is a fixed contribution based on payroll. The city contributes a fixed rate, which is currently at 18% of pay. I would like to take a moment to note that the city has done an incredible job over these years in increasing its contribution rate to COAERS. The statutory requirement for the city is 8%. Over the last several years, the city has increased that contribution rate from 8% to 18%. And while that is meaningful and has been extremely helpful, the total contribution rate between what the city contributes and what the members contribute remains fixed as a percent of payroll. What that means is that we get the same percent every year, regardless of the cost of the system. This has led to a couple challenges for COAERS as we manage our defined benefit plan. The first is that we continue to have negative cash flow. What that means is that the total contributions in from the city and the membership is less than the benefits we pay out every year. So every year we have to take money out of the trust fund to make our benefit payments. Additionally, the total contribution rate is not sufficient to pay the interest on the unfunded liability that we've accrued. This is called negative amortization. The simplest way to explain this for our members is to think about a mortgage, the difference between a 30-year mortgage and a 15-year mortgage. If you have a 15-year mortgage, the total interest that you pay over the time of your mortgage is going to be significantly less than if you have a 30-year mortgage. And if you have a 30-year mortgage, early on during your payment structure, the vast majority of your payments are going to the interest payment and not the principal payment. This is similar to the situation when you fund a defined benefit plan. The longer your amortization period is, the less that payment towards the unfunded liability is actually going to the principal, and it's going to the interest. And in some cases, and COAERS is in this situation, The actual payment to the unfunded liability is less than the interest that's being accrued that year. That is called negative amortization. So these all present challenges to COAERS in our management of the defined benefit plan. And these are the challenges that have arisen since 2011 that have us again talking about plan sustainability. But the board has been very proactive in doing this. A couple years ago, as I mentioned earlier, the board began reviewing the long-term sustainability of the retirement system. Last year, the city engaged its own study of the retirement system's long-term sustainability. That work began last summer when the city engaged a consultant, and they began work on their end. Earlier this year, the city and COAERS began working collaboratively to develop a long-term solution to our needs to make sure that the system stays sustainable for all future generations. This spring, the board adopted a framework to address those funding challenges. Those funding challenges, while they are important, do not present an immediate crisis. I'd like to take a moment here to just address a question that we were provided in advance of this, which asks whether or not these funding challenges could impact somebody's ability to receive their retirement benefit as they move into their golden years. I'd like to stress unequivocally that your retirement benefit is secure. This is protected not only by the state constitution, but by the fact that COAERS has sufficient assets as it stands today to continue to pay out benefits for many decades. But what we're looking at is a multi-decade challenge to our sustainability. And the board and the city, to all of our credit, have been proactive in trying to address this. So the board adopted this framework that focuses on three key tenets: identifying a more flexible contribution policy to ensure that the contributions coming into the system are better aligned with the costs and the need to retire the unfunded liability over an appropriate time period. We're also looking, to the extent necessary, at any benefit policies that might need to be amended to ensure we can meet our obligations to all generations of COAERS members. And we're also looking at utilizing a risk-sharing framework between the city and the employees to manage the risks inherent in running a defined benefit plan. That framework was provided to the City of Austin and its Audit and Finance Committee, which met on June 3rd. The Audit and Finance Committee received a presentation from the city's consultant, as well as the framework recommendation from the board. The City Council then directed the staff to continue work, and the city, with their consultant, have developed a series of proposals and concepts that were presented to the Board of Trustees 2 weeks ago. As part of that work, the city and COAERS have formed a working group to begin to review the specifics of how we move forward to ensure the long-term sustainability of our system. We're optimistic and looking forward to that work with the city. We've had a historically great partnership working with them, and we are very enthusiastic about our ability to work with them to ensure that we develop a long-term approach to managing the sustainability of the system. We actually had a meeting on Monday between the COAERS and City of Austin working group, and we focused predominantly on the development of an actuarially determined contribution policy. The takeaway from that meeting was that our actuary was going to provide future projections of what those contribution numbers would look like, and our working group would review them and meet again next week to continue that work. Ultimately, the long-term process of this is going to require work at the Texas legislature and passage of a package of sustainability efforts to make sure that we can make the changes necessary so that all future COAERS members can count on their retirement. We're very enthused by our ability to work with the city, and we're looking forward to that partnership. That concludes my presentation. I'd like now to turn it over to our Chief Investment Officer, Mr. David Veal, to talk about what's going on with the COAERS investment program.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, everyone. My name is David Veal, and I've been at COAERS since 2016. And before that, I held positions at Texas Teachers and Texas Employees. And like Chris, I'd like to thank everyone for their service to our great city. As you may know, all 4 members of the investment team are also members of the system who count on it for our own retirement. So we take our stewardship responsibilities very seriously. On slide 1, I'd like to show you what makes, I think, the Austin model unique. You've heard us talk in the past about what we call the Austin model to investing. And it starts with a sincere and unwavering commitment to being best in class. And that's not only among smaller funds, but also among all pension funds, including larger funds like our neighbors here in Austin. And that rests on several bedrock principles. One is clear governance. For example, the board has articulated a set of investment beliefs that serve as bedrock principles for everything that we do. So for example, we view passive public markets investments to be the default investment type for everything that we do. And the board has also established an explicit risk budget and tasked staff with achieving the highest possible return for that given level of risk. So that clear governance, we think, offers us a tremendous advantage in competing for returns in the marketplace. Secondly, we also take a highly empirical approach. So we're very data driven, and we look to analysis rather than emotion, as can often be the case for market participants. And what that does is help us to avoid chasing performance that is a very common fallacy in investments. And one example of that is private equity. So a lot of our peers have crowded into this asset class and made it a very popular choice for many funds. But our analysis suggests that going forward, the returns for that asset class are unlikely to justify the high fees. And so that's why we have advised the board that building out a private equity program at this time would not be a wise strategy, even though that seems to be the crowd favorite. We also exhibit what we call a preference for simplicity. Many funds have extremely complex structures, and we try to minimize that complexity and focus on the things that are most important. And one example of this is that last year the board voted to eliminate what's called our securities lending program, by which we lent out our stocks to hedge funds and other market participants for a small fee. That decision proved wise this year during the COVID crisis, when peers who were still doing that activity struggled to get their securities back and to be made whole on their collateral. So we avoided, I think, an important market challenge there. Fourth is also shared success. We believe in paying meaningful fees to investment managers only when performance is justified. We'll talk about this a little bit more later. But since I joined in 2016, we terminated 11 of the 13 active mandates that we had in place at the time due to performance that was not justified for the fees that we were paying. And last but not least, we believe in exemplary standards of fiduciary conduct. We always believe in putting the interests of the fund first. So as an example, we have what I believe is the most stringent ethics policy of any system we know of, and we also pay careful attention to those of our partners. Our investment consultant is RVK, is also highly aligned and has been a great success in providing us with well-aligned and highly informative strategic advice. So in the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about the asset allocation. We had one question regarding the asset allocation by type. You can see from the pie chart on the left that the fund is well diversified across asset types and geographies, stocks, bonds, real estate, all manner of investments, and on a global basis, we invest across, we figure, about 45 countries. And we focus, one of the things that makes us unique too is that we focus on true diversification. You'll see a lot of folks have what's called a core bond portfolio, where they own just a bunch of bonds and don't really give a lot of thought to what their role is in the portfolio. The board has seen fit to really focus in on that bond portfolio and ask, why do we own what we own? And as part of that, last year we increased our allocation to U.S. Treasuries, and that also paid meaningful dividends during the crisis this year, when our Treasury portfolio was up meaningfully when stocks were down. So just as a quick update on the fund, you see there at the end of last year, we were at 2.9 billion. Just an update for June, the assets were 2.75 billion, which puts us down about 5% for the year. And that breaks down roughly, equities are down about 7%, but our bonds are up about 7%. So again, going back to that focus on diversification, you see that when one asset class tends to do poorly, another tends to do well. And we think that's really important, and again, illustrates the benefit of our focus on diversification. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about performance, where I think there's a lot of great news to talk about. Over the last 10 years, you'll see that the fund has been in the 28th percentile of our peers. So that's continually among the top third of our peers. And I think that illustrates a very long tradition of stewardship in this fund that continues to get even better. You see below that in the last 3 years, for the year ending 2019, we were in the 11th percentile among our peers. So that's been the best showing since the financial crisis of 2008. And that's the first time we've been in the top quartile in a decade. And that was one of my goals when I first joined, was to make the COAERS program as good as it can be. And I'm proud of the results that we've achieved in that regard. You'll see on the right-hand side that the returns versus the risk-free rate have been exceptional as well, 4 to 5% on average over the risk-free rate, and including 7.6% over the last 10 years. So the returns to bearing a risk have been exceptional over the last 10 years. And also, one question that we get frequently is, well, how would the fund have done had we just put it into a mix of passive investments? So just maybe a mix of Vanguard funds. Well, the fund is $400 million better off over the last 10 years from the investment strategy that the board has adopted, rather than being in a mix of passive index funds. So we're proud of that result as well. So on the next slide, we'll also talk a little bit about cost. One of the most important things that we do, and one of our important advantages as well, is our emphasis on cost. And you'll see here 3 slides that emphasize some pretty important things about our cost structure. You'll see there that on the left, we think based on a firm called CEM that compiles benchmarking data for our peers, we find that we are in the lowest 10% for peer funds. So again, top decile. So we are almost as cheap as you can get for pension funds. And we think a significant portion of our performance is attributable to these savings, which we view as a guaranteed return. Again, a globally diversified portfolio for those sorts of numbers are far better than what's available to most retail investors. And in the middle chart, you'll see that we've achieved a 30% reduction in fees. We talked earlier about the reduction in the manager, sort of the right sizing of the portfolio that occurred since 2016. And so we've reduced fees on an absolute basis by 30% over the last 4 years. And one example of that is we've taken our US equity portfolio to almost completely passive, because we think it's really hard for managers to add value in US equities. And as a result, we don't believe in paying anything but passive fees in that asset class. In contrast, in corporate bonds, we've actually taken a more active approach. In corporate bonds, it's actually the art is really in not owning bonds that default. And so we think there it's actually worth paying for a manager to create a better bond portfolio than what's available from an index. And in the last panel, you'll see we highlight some of the tactical and strategic value that has been added by our managers. And here we highlight a new addition to the lineup, a firm called Hoisington Investment Management, which is a globally recognized firm, but also happens to be headquartered here in Austin. Last year, the Treasury allocation that they managed for us provided a return of 127x the fees that we paid them. So they were 30% better than the benchmark, which is unusually high, but definitely indicative of what we want to see. So when we pay if and when we do pay fees, we want to be sure that we're getting a great return on those fees for our members. And last but not least, on the last slide, we'll talk about the future initiatives. We're not ones to rest on our laurels, so we continue to work on several things. First is sort of understanding the new normal. It's no surprise to anyone on this call that we live in a very different world than we did even 6 months ago. And so it's important that we ask the questions about what does COVID mean for our investments. So we own real estate, hotels, offices, industrial parks. Those have been profoundly affected by the COVID downturn. But it's not just those, not just real estate. It's also equities and treasuries. How does what's happening in the world affect those asset classes and the correlations, for example, that we might see? What does it mean for inflation? We also are paying close attention to geopolitics, for example. There is a school of thought that says that we are entering a new Cold War with China, and you certainly see that with some of the battling closures of consulates in Houston and Chengdu and other actions that have been taken by our leadership. So we do think that that has meaningful implications for the investment landscape. We're also actively evaluating ongoing risks. So one of the things that we've highlighted to the board recently is the extreme concentration that we're seeing in the index among the top 6 stocks. So names like Amazon, Apple are now an unprecedented amount of the index. So they are essentially the tail that wags the dog when it comes to the stock market. And so we recommended to the board, and these have been approved, ways to mitigate and provide better diversification within that index so that we're not super concentrated in tech stocks. I've been around Wall Street for 20 years and do remember the tech downturn of the early 2000s. And it's our goal to learn from that experience and to protect the fund from that sort of risk again. And we're also focused on the potential risk of inflation from excessive money printing. If you watch the monetary aggregates closely like we do, you see that the growth in the money supply is running in the high double digits, so 30%, which is one of the reasons you're seeing, for example, gold and silver do as well as they have lately. And at some point, as those dollars chase, that excess of dollars chases too few goods, it may create meaningful amounts of inflation, which would represent a material change in the investment environment from what we've seen for the last 30 years. And last but not least, we do continue to focus on improving the investment program. We have created something called the Investment Risk Framework that seeks to capture and quantify the material opportunities and the risks for the fund. And again, this is part of an effort to be the very best at asset allocation, which is the key driver of investment returns for the fund. And so again, we continue to refine that process with the goal of earning the highest possible return for the risk budget that the board has established. And last but not least, we continue to seek to build the great and deep relationships with the best investment managers in the world, including small and emerging managers. Our Premier List process has proven to be a great advantage in that regard, and we will continue to build on that in the years ahead. So in conclusion, again, I'd like to thank everyone for their attention, and thank you for joining us tonight. And know that we continue to work hard for everyone on this call to build a sustainable future for the fund. And so I'd like to turn it back over to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Chris. That was excellent presentations. Now we're going to move into the question and answer portion of our event. Over the past few weeks, COAERS has received great questions from our members, and some of those questions both Chris and David interwove into their presentation. Thank you everyone who sent in your questions. As a reminder, our audience members who are tuned in can also type questions into the comment sections of the live video, and we'll do our best to get through the questions with the time we have remaining tonight. So I am going to go and ask some of the questions that were submitted to us earlier. And the first question I have is, and this is from an active member. In the recent COAERS newsletter, it is mentioned that the actuarial assumptions change was postponed. Would I be correct in assuming this change increases purchase cost and decreases payout amounts if a survivor benefit option is chosen? If this is correct, is the decrease in payouts projected to be significant? And is there any likelihood that this would go into effect before the end of the year? We're trying to do the best we can in making a big decision with a lot of moving parts. And Chris, could you respond to that question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's an excellent question. There's a couple different layers to that, so let me break those up and talk to those individually. The first part around the service purchases. Regarding service purchases, the change in assumptions is likely to increase some cost of service purchase. But I'd like to note that there are a variety of purchase options, and it really depends on what type of purchase option you are looking at. There are forms of service purchase that are going to be more directly impacted like this, such as supplementary purchases or military purchases, and those are likely to increase. But there are other forms of service purchase, such as sick leave conversion, that the costs are set by state statute. So I would recommend that if you have a specific question about a service purchase, that you reach out to our member services team, because they can look at your individual case and what you're looking at and provide you a more specific response to your needs. Regarding the joint and survivor benefit payout, this again is a very complex topic. The factors that go into this are many. I'm just going to name a few. How old are you when you choose to retire? How old is your beneficiary or surviving spouse that you would choose? And what type of joint and survivor benefit are you choosing? All those factor into whether or not your costs are going to increase or decrease. I've spoken with the COAERS actuary to confirm this, and there are a lot of factors that would go into it. In some cases, there may be an actual increase in the benefit that a member gets, or it could decrease. So in this case, again, I would strongly suggest that if you have a question, please contact our member services team, because they can look at your specific case, your specific needs. What age are you looking at retiring? Who are you thinking about choosing? And they can give you a very specific answer on that question. Regarding the timing of these changes, the board did vote to postpone the implementation of the new assumptions as we had to deal with the pandemic. As we move forward, the expectation is these new assumptions will go into effect the beginning of next year, being January 1, 2021.
Thank you, Chris. The next question I have is from an active member, and the question is, can I transfer Vanguard employee sponsored funds into my Roth?
Another great question, Madam Chair. I would like to say that first, the deferred compensation plan is not administered by the City of Austin Employees Retirement System. The city has its own deferred compensation committee that works with Empower Retirement. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the Empower Retirement representative for the City of Austin. If you don't have that contact information, I would suggest that you visit the City of Austin's deferred compensation page, where they do have contact information to get a hold of Empower. If you're also, you could contact our member services team that can provide you that contact information. But again, that is not a program that COAERS administers, and that's a very complicated question. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out to the folks at Empower.
The next question that I have is from another active member, and that is, how many years would you have to work for the City of Austin if you joined after 2010 to be able to retire with 100% of your 3 highest years of annual earnings at the time of retirement? Chris?
So if we're using 2010 as a demarcation, that could include both Group A and Group B. So Group B members are members who joined the city after January 1, 2012. So I'm not sure if this member is in Group A or Group B. First, let me say, if you're not sure what group you're in, please contact our member services team. They can get that information to you so you know which group you're in. I'm going to provide that answer for both groups. So for Group A, to have 100% of your final average salary when you retire, you would need to work 33 1/3 years, because the multiplier for Group A is 3%. If you're a Group B member and you want to achieve 100% of your final average salary in retirement, you need to work 40 years, because the multiplier for Group B is 2.5%. And again, if you have any questions about what group you're in, please contact our member services team.
Thank you, Chris. I have several more. And this I'm going to combine. There were 2 questions that had pretty much the same question, maybe different words. The first one is, it's been over, and these are from retirees. It's been over 15 years since we received a COLA. In the years prior, there were at least annual, sometimes twice in a year, increases for retirees. How much longer before we can receive this earned benefit? And just to give the benefit, make sure that the other person knows that their question was also asked, I'm going to read it as well. I have been a retiree since 2010. We have had a zero COLA increase. Is this going to continue forever?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will try to answer both those questions with a singular answer. First, I would like to note that the COLA that is allowed per our statute is not pre-funded. It is given on an ad hoc basis. So it's not built into the benefit formula. So as an earned benefit, it's not actually an official component. It's only designed to be given when the system has sufficient funds that it can provide a COLA and maintain its long-term sustainability. That long-term sustainability evaluation is made by the COAERS actuary. The COAERS actuary uses actuarial standards of practice, the board's funding policy, and the Pension Review Board's funding guidelines to make a recommendation to the board. As part of the City of Austin and the City of Austin Employees Retirement System's amended supplemental plan adopted in 2010, there is a process for the approval of any COLA. If it is recommended by the COAERS actuary, having met those standards, it would then need to be approved by the Board of Trustees. If it is approved by the Board of Trustees, it is then presented to the city manager, who would have to approve that recommendation. And then that recommendation would ultimately go to the city council for approval. So there are multiple steps that need to happen for a cost of living adjustment to be approved. But the first of which is that it must be recommended by the COAERS actuary, consistent with these funding standards. The question of when the next COLA would be granted is difficult to predict. The COLA is reviewed every year by law. So every year, the COAERS actuary reviews these funding standards and makes a recommendation to the board. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, for this year, the COAERS actuary is not recommending a cost of living adjustment. Nobody can predict what the future holds, and I would be irresponsible in trying to do that myself. So what I would say is that next year, the board will look at the recommendation of the actuary and make a decision. And again, it would need to follow the process that I have outlined for a COLA to be approved.
Thank you, Chris. The next question, and thank you for those folks that are entering on the comment line of this live feed. Has the change in the defined benefit for City of Austin employees improved the pension fund status?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. Initially, there was an improved, the funded ratio did improve slightly. But the challenge with the new tier of benefits for the Group B that's been put in place is that while Group B is now more than half of the active membership of the retirement system, it still only represents 5% of the total liability cost of the system. And what that means is the savings from that are still quite a ways in the future. 95% of our costs are driven by retirees or Group A members. So until that number starts shifting, true savings are going to be hard to materialize in large amounts. If we look out into the future, as that number moves from 5% to 20% to 50%, the expectation is that there will be significant cost improvement for the system. Unfortunately, as we discussed earlier, when those changes were put in place in 2011, they were done when we expected a 7 3/4 rate of return. We're now expecting 7%. We've now had the COVID-19 pandemic, and people are living longer, and we've had to incorporate that into our assumptions. So while it has had a small effect initially, the larger cost savings are expected to be 10 and 20 years from now, as not only the membership continues to grow, but the portion of the liability under Group B gets larger and larger.
One more question. Has there been any consideration for offering incentives for early retirement for those already at eligibility for those members that are eligible in the original plan, which I'm assuming is Plan A?
That's an excellent question. So the short answer to that is we're still working in our collaboration with the city through our working group on focusing on the contribution policy. There's going to be a lot of discussion going forward as we partner with the city on a variety of specifics. But there's a couple elements to that question that affect both COAERS and the city. From the city's perspective, and I don't want to speak for them as to how they would see, but I have worked in a prior position where I actually saw an early retirement package be put in place in response to the bursting of the dot-com bubble. While that may save some money, there are employment considerations as well as long-term cost considerations that a plan sponsor would need to consider. And so I think the city would have to conduct their own analysis as to whether that made sense for their workforce. Additionally, we would need to understand the actuarial impact to the retirement system. If that meant people were leaving earlier than we anticipated, and that could potentially increase costs. So there's a lot of layers to that question, but I can assure the member who asked that in our partnership with working with the City of Austin, as we look at our long-term sustainability, we're going to discuss a variety of options and make sure that the solution that we come up with, because we all benefit from a long-term sustainable solution, is something that works for the city as well as the membership of COAERS.
Well, thank you, Chris. It looks like that was the last question that we have received. So that concludes our question and answer segment. And thank you all those members that submitted your thoughtful questions. At this time, I'm going to ask all trustees to join on screen again and share any closing comments about today's program and discussion. And just for trustees, if you can indicate on the chat function to let me know who would like to speak, and I will call you in that order. I'm going to wait till everybody is on screen here. All right. Are there any of the board members, trustees? Ms. Leslie Poole has typed in something. I guess, could you please share that with the rest of the folks, Ms. Poole?
I think I shared it with everyone, so I don't know. It says from me to everyone. Anyway, but basically all I was saying was I'd be happy to thank everybody for tuning in. I can't see your faces, although you can see ours. And I'm just really glad that you're here. And I'm so regretful that we can't be doing this one-on-one and in the big room like we did last year at the library. And then I thought I would just sort of step off to the side, and there may be some more heavier maybe comments that others want to talk about. But basically, I'm just really happy to have everybody tuning in, and I just wish I could see y'all's faces.
Thank you, Ms. Poole. I have a comment from Ms. Amy Hunter. Amy? Amy, you may need to unmute.
Okay. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It's really exciting that we get to try out new technology in a new era. I look forward to continuing to work for you and with the City of Austin on, as you can see, it's a challenging. Oh,
Amy,
listening.
I just wanted to let you know you're going in and out. So I don't know if you need to get closer to the mic. Is that better?
Okay. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
This is awkward. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. I hope that in the future you can join us in person and remotely. I think that this is a great option for everyone. If you can't make it in person, at least you can listen to a recording or see us virtually in your living room. That would be awesome. Thank you all. I look forward to continuing to work for the fund and look out and ensure the fund's security and working closely in cooperation with the City of Austin. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Hunter. We have a comment from Ms. Yijiao Lu.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor and privilege to serve as a trustee on the board. Thank you for COAERS staff and all of trustees' hard work for the past year. I just want to say that during COVID, one of my favorite sayings were, we're all in the same storm, but we are all in different boat. Everybody's situation is different. I just want to wish all of you and your family great health, great spirit, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you, Ms. Lu. We have a comment from Mr. Anthony B. Ross, Sr. And you may need to unmute. Tony, you may need to unmute. We still can't hear you. There he is.
All right.
Thank you.
I just wanted to offer some comfort and encouragement for the retirees. I know there's been difficult these last 15 years, no COLA. But I want you to be confident that the agreed upon amount of what your retirement is secure. I hope that you walk away from this knowing that other plans across the country are in much more dire condition. And we're not even in a dire condition, but we're being visionary, looking forward in time to make sure that we get this a retirement plan in a good shape for those future generation of workers, as well as the retirees and actives. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Is there any other trustee that would like to make a comment?
Ana, this is Ed.
Yes, Ed.
Just really quick, just would thank everybody for coming today. Really appreciate your participation in the event, and thanks to all the COAERS staff who put this on. And you know, everybody should be very comfortable and comforted by the staff we have to administer the system. Our accounting staff, IT staff, benefits staff, they all are wonderful, do a great job, and appreciate them very much.
Thank you, Ed. Anyone else? All right. You know, through this unprecedented pandemic, Austin continues to show extraordinary strength and resilience. We want to thank all of you, our dedicated city workforce, past and present, our retirees and our actives, who are and have been so essential to our community's well-being. I know I speak for the board when I say that we would like to reassure you that COAERS remains steadfast in its mission to deliver benefits and unwavering in its service to our members. So I invite you to stay engaged and to reach out to COAERS staff. If you need information, or you just want to share your thoughts, please do. So thank you again for joining us. Please stay safe and good night.